Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and joining me in studio, great friend of the program, the host of the Zero Hour, and my friend, Richard R.J. Eskow.
Good to be here, Alex.
So I have this piece of yours in front of me, and it is, I don't have the headline. I just start right in the content, and it just says 10. That's how many people will die every year so Republicans can give a tax break to each of the 400 richest people in America.
Right. And that's, the reason why I wrote that, the reason why I did this math, first of all, is because the conversation gets so abstracted and people think of it in such impersonal terms, right? I mean, they say, well, X number of people, you might read a study, 43,000 people a year could die, according to one analysis, if the Trump Care bill passes and becomes law. I feel that doesn't really tell the story of exactly how that breaks down, who wins and who loses. So what I wanted to do here was say, first of all, I was thinking of this old short story that became a Twilight Zone episode called Button Button. And this story said, somebody comes to your house and says to a married couple in this story, press this button and I'll give you $100,000. No questions asked. Somebody will die, but you don't know them. So that was the premise. So they argue, and finally, the wife one of them presses the button, and then they say, "Where's the box going next?" And they say, "Don't worry, it's somebody you don't know." And so I just took that as a starting point for this to say, okay, you have the 400 richest Americans who will get on average $7 million in tax breaks each year because of the fact that this is essentially a tax cut, the Trump Care bill. What does that translate into the 43,000 lives? So I just did the math. You're cutting X amount from healthcare in order to give X amount in tax breaks in total, divide that by 43,000, and then apply the number you get against 7 million. And that's what I got. 10 people will die every year for each one of the 400 richest Americans to get an average $7 million tax break.
It makes it really nice and apparent just how sick this bill is. And what is really going on here, that these greedy liars on Wall Street, these global plutocrats, they're propagandists in the corporate media who are selling this, all of it comes down to they're willing to let people die for money.
Right. And the point is, these greedy people who are going to benefit from it, the other point I make is that if you don't take that 7 million on average, in fact, if you're wealthy and you don't take the tax break this gives you and put it to a good cause that will overturn this bill and the people pushing this bill, then you're taking blood money. That's my point. So if you want to live ethically, and you get this tax break based on death, you should take the money and spend it on a progressive cause, namely getting these people out of power and getting decent health care in this country.
And getting Medicare expanded to cover everyone so that everyone has health care as a right.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, one of the guys on the internet made a great point, which is he said...
I like that. One of the guys on the internet?
Yeah, Matt Brunig. You know who Matt Brunig is. I thought he made a great point, which is he said, just as it's killing people to overturn the Affordable Care Act, it's also people are dying because we don't have Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to take that moral logic, which I think makes sense, obviously, because I wrote a whole piece about it, then apply it to and say that's why we need a system that covers everyone and where everyone can afford the care they need.
Yeah. I mean, where affordability isn't even a concept. I had Wendell Potter in earlier.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I like getting down to these kind of like really basic concepts, like affordability does not make sense in a healthcare system except one that looks like ours, right? If healthcare is provided as a right to people, there is no affordability. You have a right for healthcare. That's what you get. Pre-existing conditions don't exist. That's not a real thing.
No,
it's a concept that was created by insurance companies to make money. But like once we allow this concept to take hold, this framework, then these other things like healthcare as a right, everybody literally has access to healthcare all the time. it doesn't make sense because we've allowed these other concepts to come in, and now we're kind of defining our reality with them. And pre-existing condition is my favorite one. That is literally not a thing. Life is a pre-existing condition. Right. There is no such thing as pre-existing condition. It only is a concept from billionaires, Wall Street-driven insurance companies to make money.
Henny Youngman, the old comedian, knew that because his old doctor routine, you said, "We ever have this before?" He said, "Yeah, well, you got it again." You know, I mean, that is, in fact, the nature of life. And as soon as you come down with something, whether you break your arm or you catch a cold, from that moment forward, it's a pre-existing condition. That's how abstract the notion of pre-existing condition is. And one more quote for you. The Labor Party, lion of the Labor Party, when it was a left party, Tony Benn, said, you know, no general ever said, "I need to bomb Baghdad, but I don't have the budget for it." Right?
Exactly.
So, you know, when it comes to healthcare, well, we hate to see 43,000 people die, but we don't have the budget. Well, yeah, you do.
And in fact, the most ludicrous thing is people don't understand the moral imperative of healthcare as a right. That just doesn't compute with me. Slightly less hard for my brain, but these numbers and cents guys, right? The ones who they might actually calculate a person's life as expendable, right? Like, I don't understand that, but they exist. How do they not see that? I mean, everyone who knows how the budget and numbers and everything works, our system is so wildly inefficient that it costs us massive. It is the only thing that you could say is actually unaffordable, that you could say we don't have the budget for, is our broken healthcare system.
Right.
We literally can't afford what we have right now projected out into the future. Because if you do the excess cost growths on healthcare, we can't afford this bananas non-system that we have right now. A single payer system would be far more efficient than what we have right now. We would deliver better care for less money. I mean, that, even if you don't understand the moral, right? Even if you have no moral compass, how you don't look at the numbers of this and see that we can't continue doing what we're doing.
You know, it's this tunnel vision that you see. I mean, you know my story about meeting Tim Geithner. It's just a lot of these guys create a universe for themselves where certain things just don't exist when they're inconvenient for them to exist. And I think on the right, it's even worse. And think about how severe the problem really is. The U.S. pays 40% more than the closest economy for healthcare because we have this terrible privatized system, and we also don't cover tens of millions of people under this system. So and we're talking about what, $1.6 trillion a year. So we're subsidizing basically $750 billion every year to keep our private insurance system going. We are covering enormous amounts of money and letting people die for a system that doesn't work. And yet we say we can't subsidize, quote unquote, healthcare for everyone.
Right. And don't leave out the fact that the people who, that the healthcare that is delivered, if you're one of the lucky ones in our non-system, it's still worse. It's not as good. The care we get, we pay more for worse care in this country.
And sometimes for medical interventions we don't need.
Because of so many, I'm just vociferously agreeing with you.
Heated agreement, yeah.
It's just, again, like, I don't understand. Here, I'll do this. We have a couple minutes on this one.
Okay.
Because you and I can always riff philosophy.
Right.
When I was fighting for Obamacare, and I know you were very critical of it, and you were right. But Medicaid expansion was worth it for me, right? Like, just the Medicaid expansion was a really, it's a step in the right direction. I'm always a single payer. I'll never fight for Obamacare again. I won't. I will only now fight for Medicare for everybody. And I learned that through this process, because look where we are right now. Look, we cannot allow the insurance companies to continue to exist because they will never stop. But when I was fighting for Obamacare, when it was hard, it was arduous, late nights, it was a stressful process. 2 years of my life, when I dug deep, I could picture the clients that I had when I worked in outreach clinics, right? I knew what I was fighting for. I watched the brokenness of our system harm people and people die because they didn't have access. I knew what I was fighting for, this moral imperative that I had, and it allowed me to just keep, how do they do it? Like, what is there that when they dig deep, you know, and they're like, oh, I'm going to throw tens of millions of people off of healthcare, you know, like, what is it when they dig deep? What do they find?
The mistake in your logic is this: they never dig deep.
That's what it is.
That's not part of what they do. What they do is it's a gig that's going to pay well and pay really well once they leave politics. That's what it's all about for them. It's the end game.
And that's it. That's why it's so easy for them. When they voted in the House, we had hundreds of people who'd been there for hours, and we lined up and were chanting shame as they walked down to the buses. Yeah. And, you know, there were a bunch of these guys who literally just voted to attack 7 million veterans, raid Medicare, $118 billion, destroy Medicaid, $880 billion, and on and on and on, the terribleness of Trump care. And they were giving these thumbs up, you know, they were vamping on
Remember, I was in that world. It's a little insulated world. I was, oh, man, Alex, that was tough getting yelled at. But, yeah, we got it done, didn't we? Yeah, man, have another beer. That's it. That's
how
the
it
world.
goes.
That's how it goes.
Richard, can you stick around and take some calls with me?
Absolutely.
Richard R.J. Eskow, host of the 0 Hour, great friend of the program and a friend of mine, joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. We're going to be right back after this.